It is important to master the brew and not let it master you.
Holla ballers, what's going on? It's Preacher, and today we're going to look at one of my favourite tanks in the game, actually. Not something I would main, but we'll get into that later on. But I love this tank. Super aggressive, super cool, works its own unique way. Brewmaster time. Let's go. So let's get started with our Brewmaster, shall we? Doesn't she look good? Doesn't she look good? Now, we're going to have to do a little bit of setup for this. The Brewmaster is unique. It's very unique. It's kind of sad when I saw the Demon Hunter tank and it was nowhere near as unique as what they did with the Brewmaster. But having said that, one of the reasons a lot of people don't like the Brewmaster, and it got less attention than I think Blizzard hoped for, was exactly that reason. It was different. People didn't like it. And mainly that's due to an ability called Stagger we're going to talk about in a minute. You see, most people in the game, when they play RPGs or play any other video game in the goddamn world, when it comes to taking damage, they want to take that damage and then someone's going to heal X damage, right? Brewmasters don't work that way. Brewmasters don't work that way. And in fact, the different way they work, which is what appeals to me, actually, I think it's a really fun and interesting way of dealing with things, is exactly what turns people away from playing it. But hopefully not after this video, you'll understand how it works and how it's actually extremely cool. So, they also carry with them the freedom. They're not set in stone on certain stats, which is amazing in the current day Legion, right? I think we could all agree on that. You can actually base your stat setup in some ways, like on feel. Now, don't worry, Theory Crafters, I'm going to explain it a little bit more clearly later. But let's get into some basic stuff. Stagger. What is Stagger? Well, a Brewmaster never takes a full hit to the face. Doesn't matter if it's a sword, a fist, a boot. Doesn't matter, right? It doesn't take it. Instead, what they do is shrug off attacks. So it's all this thematic idea of being able to dodge and move around, and all this plays very, very vividly into the Brewmaster setup. So you shrug off attacks. That means if someone hits you for 1,000,000 damage, right, you will only ever take 60% of that, right? You take 600k. The remaining 400k, or 40% of that physical damage that you could take, right? So Kill Jaden, for example, hits you for 1,000,000. Actually, it's way harder than that. But it hits you for 1,000,000, right? You only actually get hit for 600k. He can't hit you harder than that, right? You only take ever 60% of the damage that was thrust upon you. 40% of that damage then gets converted into a damage over time, a dot, called Stagger. And Brewmasters always are staggering. The only way you get rid of it is by being out of combat for ages, right? It takes like 10 seconds for this dot to wear off. It lasts a while, or, you know, dying, which is ideally not the situation. It's, you know, in an ideal world, you'll still be alive. So that's what you do. You get this damage over time. And every time you get hit, it checks how much did that hit you for. Okay, so we're going to take 40% of that damage and add it into this dot. And it keeps going up and dropping down and dropping up and going down. And it keeps just calculating this damage. And over 10 seconds, you will take 40% of the damage that you took 10 seconds ago, right? Nice and easy. Also does this with magic, as you can see there. Affects magical attacks at 40% effectiveness as well. Okay, so that's how this works. You never take these full hits. But what you will have is this constant damage over time ticking on you. Some other things we really do need to be aware of, though. Our Mastery Elusive Brawler. Each time you are hit by a melee attack, right, so you get slapped in the face, or you use your Blackout Strike, which is one of your abilities, or your Breath of Fire, another one of your abilities, you gain stacking, 33% increased dodge chance until your next successful dodge. Right? And it also increases your attack power by 33%. That sounds pretty cool, right? Maybe we should stack some mastery. Doesn't work against magic, does it now? If it's a heavy magic attack, dodging, you can't dodge a spell. That doesn't work. So which means our mastery is a very loose idea when you're thinking about stats. You're thinking like, oh god, this guy hits me really fucking hard. Hardcore. But it's all physical stuff. I'm going to go with some heavy mastery here. I'm going to take a mastery setup, right? But what if this is like all magic damage? He's just casting in my face. Well, you can't dodge that. So maybe I want to go a different route there. Maybe I want to change things up just a little bit. And this is why we get this sort of free-flowing idea of how you want to build your Brewmaster to suit the occasions. One of the things that makes them very, very inviting for a lot of guilds is they can tailor themselves very nicely. Gift of the Ox. When you take damage, which should be quite a lot if you're tanking, you have a chance to summon a healing sphere visible only to you. Moving through this healing sphere heals you for 335. Again, Blizzard kind of does want you moving around, right? And doing things. They want you to be doing that. But this pairs up nicely with this ability, Celestial Fortune. You have a chance which is equal to your critical strike chance to be healed for an additional 65% of the amount healed. That includes from other healers. That's not just your healing spheres that we're getting from Gift of the Ox, right? That is from people healing you. Based on your crit chance, you get this synergy going on. And all these synergies, you might look at some of the other tanks we've looked at who have nowhere near as many interesting passives as these guys have. And this is what makes the Brewmaster so interesting, because this idea of synergy is going to continue into the talent section. So let's talk about our abilities. As a Brewmaster, you might be surprised to find out that it's all about the beer, right? And drinking the beer and doing good things and guzzling and guzzling and guzzling, right? They love it, a good guzzle. They like it, and they want more and more of it all the time. Now, as you can see, these are the healing spheres I just talked about from the Gift of the Ox. As you can see, it's all about drinking beer, so I want you to bear that in mind. Mitigating damage as a Brewmaster is done with really two ways that are going to be your active process. You're going to have one brew, it's called your Iron Skin brew. It increases the damage you delay with Stagger, we just talked about how Stagger worked, by an additional 35% for 7.5 seconds. However, this shares a charge with Purifying brew. So if you've never played a Brewmaster before, and you've just listened to what I've said, you can obviously figure out, just because I'm delaying 40% of the damage, pretty sure it's still going to build up to the point where it can kill me. Yeah, you're right. You could stagger a hit, sure, and survive, but the stagger amount can go well beyond your maximum HP. Like, well beyond. So it can fucking kill you. But, well, in fact, stagger can never kill you. It can get you down to 1 HP, but it can never kill you. But being at 1 HP as a tank is still a pretty bad place to be, as you can probably understand. So when you're tanking, you get this circular idea. It goes from like yellow all the way up to red, and it'll trigger at red if the stagger dot is above 60% of your maximum HP, right? Once you've reached 60%, it will flash red and be like, okay, you're pretty dicked. But that's not entirely true. Again, this is fast and loose with a Brewmaster. You might panic, because once you get red stagger, that means the damage over time effect you're taking is higher than 60% of your HP. You might panic, especially if you're doing like heroics, early mythics. You might not ever see the stagger notification come up as red. It's entirely possible to go a really, really long time without that ever happening. And before that point, you're probably going to be using your Iron Skin brew, just talked about there, far more regularly than Purifying brew. So what does Purifying brew do? It clears 44% of your damage delayed, at least on my character, delayed with your stagger. So what it does is it halves the dot damage you're taking, right? Pretty much, 44%. Near enough halves the dot damage you're taking. But it has a shared cooldown with Iron Skin brew, which means there's a balance to be found. Now, in an ideal world, and we'll talk about this shortly, you should have pretty much 100% uptime with Iron Skin brew, right? Drinking brews is really, really good, and you want to be recharging them constantly. But on occasion, especially when you get better at your Brewmaster and harder content, you're going to want to start clearing. What I want to point out here is when you jump in with your Brewmaster, and I'll do a gameplay video to come alongside this, just because your stagger looks mean and scary as it leans towards red or gets towards red, doesn't necessarily mean you need to clean it. Now, what I absolutely do not want is people to hear that and go, well, I could go well beyond red because Preach said it don't matter that much. No, it's a choice. Most of the time in red, sure, you're going to purify it away, or even if it gets to dark orange or something like that. Ideally, get an add-on to track exactly what is happening with your stagger, because the visual notification ain't that helpful, right? Ain't that helpful, so get some sort of idea. Brewmaster have been doing this forever with tracking guard. I released a ton of add-ons to track your guard and things like that. So you find the best way that suits you to make the decision. Do I want to purify the stagger? Or is it not enough damage that it's a problem? Is a renew going to out-heal this? Or do I want to keep up my Iron Skin brew better, right? But you've got to keep drinking those brews. You've got to keep doing it, all right? So those are the basic ideas for mitigating damage. Is you're always going to have stagger up. You'll get used to it. But depending on the content you do, you might not see red for quite some time, and then you might panic. I'm just saying, It's okay. That just means you took a shitload of damage. You might even be up until, like, killed... I've tanked on this Brewmaster. I don't think I really saw red even in Tomb Normal till kill Jaden, I kind of want to say. If memory serves, it was a while back. But, yeah, it might not have been up till there. So, some other abilities we've got then. Keg Smash. Now I've explained the two main brews, and there are several other brews. Keg Smash is your #1 ability. You want to keep this thing on fucking cooldown at all times. It costs 40 energy. Always make sure you have enough energy if Keg Smash is coming back to actually cast the thing. Why is it so important? One, it does a load of damage to all enemies within 8 yards. That's going to hit everything around you. And it reduces the remaining cooldown of your brews by 4 seconds. A really interesting aspect of the Brewmaster is some abilities appear to have a really big cooldown, namely our Shield Wall style ability, Fortifying Brew. But no, it's also a brew, right? It's also a brew. So it kicks off with a 7-minute cooldown. Holy shit, that's insane. My monks, my DKs is 3 minutes. My warriors gets it like every minute and a half. Yeah, relax. It's a brew. That means abilities like Keg Smash are constantly reducing its cooldown back down again. That's why it has a 7-minute cooldown. So what it does is it turns your skin to stone for 15 seconds, increases your current and maximum health by 20%, increases the damage you delay with Stagger by an additional 10%, and reduces all damage you take by 20%. It's massive. It is hugely powerful, and it is deserving of that cooldown time. But remember, it's a brew. Reduces the remaining... What does Keg Smash do? Reduces the remaining cooldown of your brews by 4 seconds, right? So again, that cooldown is kind of constantly whittling down. So get used to what your Brewmaster does, right? You can also have some randomization through your artifact pile that maybe it's going to do slightly more cooldown, but get used to the idea. But that also is effective for Iron Skin Brew and, of course, for your Purifying Brew. Breath of Fire, 15-second cooldown. You breathe fire on the targets in front of you, causing 130,000 fire damage and generating a stack of Elusive Brawler. We talked about that earlier in the video. That's the dodge chance. Targets affected by Keg Smash will also burn for 300,000 fire damage over 60 seconds. So as long as you Keg Smash first and then Breath of Fire them, you'll get this dot damage to go along with it. So you can see here, if I just Breath of Fire this, no dot damage. Aren't I a sad little man? Oh no, I've got no Breath of Fire. But if I was to Keg Smash it, then burn it, then we get all that extra dot burning damage, increasing our DPS and so on and so forth. Very, very cool. Other abilities we have is our artifact ability, Exploding Keg. A lot of people shit on this, but honestly, if you're into doing your science, you'll find some cool uses for this. So you have a Flaming Keg at the target location. It's the most damaging ability we have. Whee! Oof. Yeah, hits like a fucking truck. It looks really stupid as well, I agree. Has some travel time. You notice there that I threw it and then it has to travel to hit the target. So bear that in mind as well. There is some travel time. Does some damage to nearby enemies and causes them to miss their melee attacks for the next 3 seconds. Not all, but there are some very, very, very powerful abilities in-game that you could use on bosses, and other tanks will be so sad. I'm talking some serious stuff. Our tank previously was a paladin and switched over to the Brewmaster just because of some of the stupid cheese that you can pull off. Not just with Exploding Keg, but generally with a Brewmaster in general. So, generally with a Brewmaster in general, I apologize for that sentence, but that you can actually pull off with a Brewmaster. You'll have to do some science, or you'll have to read some forums or something like that to find the optimal uses, but they're out there, and you can make bosses miss some really crucial shit sometimes. We have Blackout Strike, 3-second cooldown, doesn't cost anything. As you can see, we have no chi with the Brewmaster. That's gone. We've gone. But what we do have is a full energy bar, and our abilities cost energy. So, Blackout Strike, 3-second cooldown, strike with a blast of chi energy, dealing 323,000 physical damage and generating a stack of Elusive Brawler. So this is kind of a filler spell, but it also carries a cooldown along with it, which means you're weaving these abilities in. Keg Smash, #1 priority. Weaving in. I'm going to show you here now. If I Keg Smash this, right, and then I breathe fire on it, you see that we get this dot damage, which is going to keep ticking. Yeah? Reduces damage to the caster by 4%. Something else you need to note there is when you line these up nicely and this Breath of Fire is on there, great damage reduction on you, because you can hit many, many targets with it. So a 4% damage reduction there. Our other ability is Tiger Palm, 25 energy. So you'll notice our main two abilities with the Brewmaster are Keg Smash at 40 energy and our Tiger Palm at 25 energy. And we have other abilities which you can weave in between. Now, Tiger Palm Attacks with the palm of your hand, dealing 68,000 damage. Not that impressive. But it also reduces the cooldown of your brews by 1 second. So already, most of you should be able to figure out, I kind of see what this is all about now. We're weaving all these abilities. I need to save enough energy so I have Keg Smash whenever a Keg Smash comes up. And then in between there, I have all these extra things that work together to form a rotation. So I could do things like Keg Smash, Blackout Kick, Tiger Palm, Breath of Fire, right? And come back in here. I could spam Tiger Palm as long as I have enough energy left in order to cast my Keg Smash. And it doesn't matter if I wait a second like there. Doesn't matter as long as I'm using my abilities effectively. I want to make sure I've got 40 energy for Keg Smash. You can see the way I've delayed it there. I'm not trying to get rid of my energy, I'm trying to fill, but all the time I'm reducing the cooldown of my brews. This makes the Brewmaster such an aggressive tank. An aggressive tank. And it actually works in a very similar way to the Windwalker in that every ability you press carries some weight. And this is what really crucially appeals to a lot of players, alright? So I want to get back to stats for a minute. We go back to stats. I explained the mastery there. Mastery can be extremely good, especially on physical attacks. However, I will point out getting too much becomes less and less effective because obviously, let's look at what it actually does, right? You gain a stacking buff of 33% dodge until you dodge. Right? And that only happens after you're hit by melee sometimes, each time you're hit by melee, or hit with Blackout Strike, or Breath of Fire, right? You're going to get the stack buff. But you can't back-to-back it immediately. It's very unlikely that's going to happen. So very early on in your life of Mastery, it's going to kind of run its course. Similarly with Haste, it increases, what does your Haste do? It increases your attack speed, spellcasting speed, and energy regeneration. Well, as you saw then, we have a kind of set in stone amount of globals we can use to keep this flowing nicely. If we get to the point where our energy bar is just, we're fighting against our energy bar is a good way to put it. This is why I was talking about feel earlier. If you're fighting against your energy bar to try and get rid of it, and you're actually doing that at the expense of keeping brews up and doing other things that are more important while you're tanking, you've got too much haste, and you could drop it back down. So in early days, I'd recommend you get a decent amount of haste. You can see my haste is quite nice here, about 20%. You saw I was having no issues there. Maybe you want to go a little bit further. And then think about what you're going to do next. Crit. Great for extra damage, right? Does some cool stuff with our healing. I talked about that Celestial Fortune we had earlier on. A Versatility, which just flat out increases damage and healing done by 6% and decreases damage taken by 3%. So it's just this kind of nonchalant buff. It's not particularly useful. I mean, there are no bosses that just cast, right? So Mastery, pretty good, but you can sort of like let it go after a while once you've got some good stacking up there and you're quite happy with your dodge chance. Then maybe look into crits, just take extra healing. Overall, the rest of the choices are going to come from here. So base your ideas on those thought processes of what these things actually do, particularly what your mastery does, what's going to be more useful for you in that situation. Okay, I know that's difficult, but I'm trying to explain to you why there's no set in stone stuff. It's really important and crucial that you understand why I can't just go, just take this, 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 and this. It doesn't really work like that with the Brewmaster, but that is the joy of a Brewmaster. So let's look at everything else. Our talents there, Chi Burst, Eye of the Tiger, or Chi Wave. Right, so Chi Wave, 50-second cooldown, you're going to throw the Chi Wave, as we've seen many, many times, through enemies and dealer violence. It's not particularly effective for the Brewmaster. Remember, we're looking generally for damage and survivability. Now, Chi Burst is in a similar boat. It's pretty decent AoE damage, honestly, but it's a ranged cast. We already have plenty to do, and it's situational. How often are you really going to be AoEing? And that means that for overall, you tend to go with Eye of the Tiger. Tiger Palm also applies Eye of the Tiger. Of course, we're going to be pressing Tiger Palm. It's going to reduce our brews, so we're doing that anyway. Deals 112,000 nature damage to the enemy, and 80,000 healing to the monk over 8 seconds. So you're adding this constant, permanent hot in all situations to yourself. There are some scenarios like if there's ranged mobs to be picked up, maybe you want to Chi Burst them or something like that. But in nearly all occasions, you're taking Eye of the Tiger, all right? Level 30, personal choice, similar to the Windwalker. So they're the exact same talents. Again, I personally prefer Tiger's Lust. Chi Torpedo, if you want to travel much further, much quicker. Let's say you're doing Mythic Gul'dan or something like that, and you have to try and get you have to bait the demon within to the outside. I know that's a rather niche scenario, but I'm just trying to give you an idea is where you need to suddenly be somewhere else and then back into the raid. Chi Torpedo is going to come in very handy, but always bear in mind that Tiger's Lust can be cast on other players. Remember, you do have good mobility naturally as a Brewmaster. You can travel some good distances very quickly. Maybe being able to Tiger's Lust other people is going to be a good thing. A level 45 then. So I explained a lot of how the Brewmaster works. And sure, it's going to take you a little while to get used to weaving all these abilities in and out while simultaneously keeping up with your brews. Which means you might want to take light brewing in the early days. Now, it's just overall less effective, which I think is fair for a totally passive ability. It reduces the cooldown of Iron Skin Brew and Purifying Brew by 3 seconds and increases the maximum number of charges by 1. I see this talent as that you can make some mistakes and it's not going to be that big of a deal talent. And I think that's fair to say. Is it as effective as the other ones? No. But it's entirely passive and you don't have to worry about it, which I think in early days of gameplay is really nice. Black Ox Brew is going to be standard choice in nearly all scenarios. Note, once again, it's a brew. Yes, that means that 1.5 minute cooldown is a fucking lie. It's a lying motherfucker, just like Fortifying Brew. In fact, the cooldown is going to be way less than that. You chug some Black Ox Brew, instantly refills all your energy, and your Iron Skin Brew and Purifying Brew charges. That's right, I was talking earlier about 100% uptime on Iron Skin Brew, which is what a lot of people aim for, which means watch my Iron Skin Brew charges here. You see these 3 here? I'm going to go chug, you can see it's tracking the cooldown. Then I'm going to pop my brew. Look, I got them all back. Woohoo! Aren't I awesome? Aren't I awesome, right? Which means you can chug and chug and chug and chug. Now, obviously, you're not going to play like that, but you can get the idea why you could just chug, 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 and then fill it back up. Also, the extra energy that you get from Black Ox Brew means it's even more aggressive, right? That's more Tiger Palms, leading into more reduced cooldowns. This is that aggressive style that I'm trying to talk about, okay? So you get to do that with the Black Ox Brew. The cooldown is very short, which means you can have some good fun with it. Look, it's already down to a minute, so nice and easy. Gift of the Mist, though. Gift of the Ox is up to 75% increased chance to trigger based on your healing, on your missing health. So these are the healing orbs, right? These are the healing orbs. It depends what you do. You do stuff without a healer. Let's say you're doing Demonic Inquisition in Tomb, and you're like the downstairs tank on, say, normal mode. So you don't in Heroic and Mythic, or most guilds don't, but in normal mode, you tend to throw a third tank and have them cycling through so that it's always available for someone to go down, particularly if you're in pugging, and you might be down there on your own for a while. If you're in that scenario, being able to just regularly heal yourself or heal yourself even more consistently. Brewmasters aren't big self-healers. That's not what they do. But you can kind of levy that with Gift of the Mist just to get some more healing orbs going. A level 16 tied down to you. Most of the time, certainly if you're M+ing, it's going to be leg sweep and whatnot. Summon Black Ox statue is always the option there, right? So I talked in the Windwalk video about bosses like Tichondrius, where ads spawn in random locations and you want to pull them together. Recent fights as well, or not that recent, have been like Cenarius with the whelps. You could always pull all the whelps to one location. Being able to put down a statue, or Dave, put Dave down somewhere and just say, okay, Dave, you drag all the enemies to there. I'll come along. I could taunt them and I could get aggro on them. But what they don't do is run off and grab healers and attack DPS and spread out all over the place. And maybe a better example is, and the Brewmaster in the comments can confirm this. I tanked upstairs, or the live version, but Desolate Host downstairs, grabbing all the ads that are going to spawn there, using the statue to grab them and gather them all up. Level 75. So, interesting choices here. Dampen Harm reduces all the damage you take by 20%, 50%. Do you need another damage reduction cooldown? That's the question you ask yourself. Am I going to die here if I don't take an extra damage reduction cooldown? If not, pass go. So that's all Dampen Harm is. Do I need, or I'm going to die in this fight, another damage reduction cooldown? And the way my class naturally works with staggering all things isn't going to be good enough, right? It's actually kind of rare. You'd be surprised. They're not a very cooldown heavy tank. They're naturally always under some form of cooldown. That's the cool thing about them. Mystic Vitality. Stagger is 40% more effective against magical attacks. I don't think I need to explain that. Is it vast majority magical damage? Right? Or is it just the fact that magical damage here is a bitch? Is magical damage playing a major part of this fight in some way? That's your thought process, because Healing Elixirs is decent, it's not great. So base it on, like, is this like, oh yeah, there's some pretty heavy or nasty magical damage here, I'm going to take Mystic Vitality. And it just passively does more damage reduction. Hey! Healing Elixirs. So you get to heal for 50% of your max health, which is no small heal, by the way. It's no small heal, particularly as your gear gets better. I mean, this monk is only 905, and it's like 6.5 mil. So it's no small heal. So you get this on-demand heal on a 30-second cooldown. Healing Elixir will automatically trigger if you drop below 35% health. So if you suddenly get hammered into the ground, you'll get this heal. Doesn't matter, you don't need to press a button or anything, right? Really easy. And it has 2 charges. So a bit of extra self-healing. Obviously, if you're taking a lot of magical damage, then Mystic Vitality just default wins. But you see the idea. At level 90, now in nearly all scenarios, even single target, you're taking Rushing Jade Wind now. It fits really nicely. It doesn't cost anything. It's just on a 5-second cooldown, and it weaves nicely into all the buttons you're pressing. So you might notice JW, a friend of mine, Just Wait, was rushing Jade Wind on Avatar for similar reasons. So the Fallen Avatar Mythic was just rocking Rushing Jade Wind, even with the tight timers there. Very cool ability, wonderful in Mythic Plus. It summons a whirling tornado around you, and it just whooshes around. Whee! I'm just constantly AoEing everything around me for decent amounts of damage. Makes life much, much easier, and fits into your rotation quite nicely. Doesn't cost you anything. You noticed earlier that I was still like, you know, your energy's quite low, you're working things in. There's always a time for Rushing Jade Wind. Special delivery. Drinking Iron Skin or Purifying Brews, 100% chance to toss a keg high into the air that lands nearby after 3 seconds, dealing 160,000 damage. So you get this on demand. Rushing Jade Wind just tends to win out over this, but Special Delivery is there if you don't want an extra button to press, if that's how you're thinking. Invoke New Zao, again, similar to what I said about Zuen in the Windwalkers. I wish this was better, unfortunately not. Again, if you really need to squeeze some damage into a 45-second window for some reason, I can't really think of when you're going to do this, then New Zao would be the way to go. I'm sure someone could give some little niche examples maybe in the comments of where they found New Zao helpful, but most of the time you just got to be rushing Jade Winding around, which most Brewmasters should be happy with, because this makes life much easier, especially when tanking like Mythic Plus and speed tanking. Okay, at level 100, Elusive Dance Purifying Brew now clears an additional 20% of damage delayed with Stagger, and it also grants up to 20% dodge and damage for 6 seconds, based on the level of Stagger damage purified. Unfortunately, it's just too situational to be overall useful. Again, it comes down to dodge and the 20% damage. You don't always need the dodge, that's not really the problem. And the 20% extra Stagger, not really. That's not what you're aiming for. So Elusive Dance feels kind of weak sauce for the most part. High Tolerance, though, if you're new to this, take High Tolerance. I started with High Tolerance in Legion while I was still getting used to the changes. I played a lot of Brewmaster since Mists of Pandaria, but still took High Tolerance at the start. So Stagger passively just delays an additional 10% of incoming damage. Can't argue with that. You're just going to take less damage. And you gain up to 15% haste based on your current level of Stagger, which means you're allowed to fire off more abilities to counter it. So it's a really nice little passive safety net that you won't even notice happening. The alternative to that is quite a bit more complicated, which is why people prefer High Tolerance. But if you played a Windwalker, this will make total sense to you. It's basically the return of hit combo. Blackout Strike. Okay, so Blackout Strike, you probably remember, is that 3-second cooldown ability. Yeah, I talked about it earlier on. So what Blackout Strike now does is now you give a shit about what you're pressing after. So from the start of the video, I've talked about weaving abilities. Now that becomes much more prominent and is, for me, some might disagree with this, but again, it's a subjective opinion. This is what they intended you to play with the Brewmaster. I believe this is what Blizzard always intended you to play with, was to have Blackout Combo. So it's distinctly more powerful when you get it right. So when you press Blackout Strike, you'll gain a buff which affects one of the next buttons you press. So if you press Tiger Palm after Blackout Strike, you'll do 200% increased damage. Not that interesting. If you press Breath of Fire, the cooldown is reduced by 3 seconds. Very interesting if you're doing AoE tanking, because of course Breath of Fire comes with that passive damage reduction on the people it's burning. If you did Keg Smash after, reduces the remaining cooldown of your brews by additional 2 seconds. So if you take Blackout Combo, you are always using Blackout Strike before Keg Smash. It's absolutely the #1 priority. As you've probably now figured out, having more brews just passively makes your life so much easier. Oh my god. So the more cooldown you can get on those brews, the better. If you press Iron Skin Brew, it pauses your Stagger damage for 3 seconds. Yeah, not too useful. Not really something you're going to work in too often. And if you did Purifying Brew, it grants you a stack of Elusive Brawler. Again, situational at best. The priority abilities here are #1, Keg Smash. Right, #1 Keg Smash. Iron Skin Brew is pretty decent to do. Breath of Fire, 3-second cooldown reduction is also really nice. It depends on what you're doing. But just remember, if you take Blackout Combo, never again will you be, especially while your brews are on cooldown, we're pressing Keg Smash without it. So you can see when I use my Blackout Strike, we get the Blackout Combo buff. And it's like, what are you, your next abilities of power, what are you pressing next? Oh, you're using Breath of Fire? Okay, I'm going to reduce the cooldown of that, all right? I'm going to reduce cooldown. You can also see that stacking Elusive Brawler. So my dodge chance is now 100%. But then it disappears and resets. So those are your talent choices, and that's the thoughts you're going to go with as you get into it. Let's look at the gameplay. Few things we want to talk about here. Obviously, from the talent discussion, you'll be well aware that a big part of this is using as many brews as possible. Now, I said you will have 100% uptime on Iron Skin Brew. That doesn't mean you spam it. In fact, Iron Skin Brew is going to cap out once you've got like 24 seconds of Iron Skin Brew. That means you can't just go, wait for it to come back off cooldown here. What you can't do is go drink, 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 and then pop a, like something like Black Ox Brew, just drink, drink, drink. Once it hits 24 seconds on Iron Skin Brew, it's not going to keep going up, and you're now wasting charges of it. So you have to manage that. But what you certainly want to do is keep a brew recharging. So, with that said, how do we do that? The first thing you're going to want to do is to make sure you always have one charge of Iron Skin Brew in reserve, right? Or one charge of Purifying Brew, right? And the reason for that is, what if, God forbid, shit suddenly hits the fan? That's what you've got to be careful of. What if it suddenly goes ultimately wrong? So what you want to do is track something here. I should stop attacking because I'm talking about something else. You want to keep tracking here and make sure you've always got one in reserve. In case you suddenly get hit by something, the other tank dies and something suddenly turns to you, any emergency situation, that you've always got a charge of Purifying Brew in reserve, ready and raring to go. And with the fact that you can't just infinitely stack Iron Skin Brew anymore, you used to be able to do that. You used to be able to just get it up to like minutes at a time. Now you can't do that. So now it's at 24 seconds, which means you could be a little bit more free to actually keep some charges in reserve. Just make sure your brew charges, your Iron Skin Brew and your Purifying Brew, which share the same system, don't hit 3 or their maximum amount of charges depending on talents. You're good, right? Ideally, you want them with one charge in reserve because obviously you don't want to waste cooldown time as it'll move into the next charge. Other than that, if you take a Blackout combo, just be aware you want to be Blackout kicking before you keg smash, right? And trying to keep your energy below 100. That's what you're trying to do here. So you have a lot of plates to manage, right? There's no doubt about that. You absolutely have a lot of plates to manage. But once you get used to it, it's a hell of a lot of fun. And you get this very, very, as I said, super aggressive style of play that you'll get used to, and you want to keep everything rocking, rolling. You can see, like, I'm trying to show you here. Like, you'll see when I pop this, you see the way it jumps to the next charge on there with that sweep in the background? You might not be able to see it, but it's there. You're trying to keep yourself at one charge, yeah? And at the same time, making sure that everything's ticking, you're not capping energy, and you're getting the most use out of all your abilities. Simplify the process. I want to keep Keg Smash on cooldown. I don't want to hit 3 charges of brews, right? And I want to just use all my other abilities to their fullest. Once you think about it that way, you'll get a much easier time of using Brewmaster, all right? Now, I said I will do a gameplay video to go alongside this. It might be on the Daily Preach or something like that. But once you see it all happening, your fingers kind of flow into this rotation. Like, oh, Keg Smash is coming back. Okay, that means I use Blackout Strike first, yeah? You'll fall into this rotation where everything just kind of lines up naturally, and it becomes a very, very easy process to play. I don't want you to walk away from this feeling like overwhelmed at all, because it's not overwhelming. Once you get used to it, it's not overwhelming at all. It's a very simple style of play. So what the cooldowns I want to mention then? Obviously, leg sweep, you do have the option to Crackly Jade Lightning, and most importantly, you have Zen Meditation. A spell that's very rarely used by a lot of tanks. But the good Brewmasters will... They kind of judge you on whether you know what Zen Meta does or not, or where you can use it. Trust me, any elite Brewmasters out there will absolutely judge you based on Zen Med alone. So what does it do? It reduces all damage taken by 60% for 8 seconds. However, you can't move. And if you're hit by a melee attack or taking another action, it will cancel it. So basically, anything you do during Zen Med will stop Zen Med, right? This ability allows you to cheese massive mechanics, that like abilities that groups have to soak, things like that. But bear in mind, you have to time it right. Because if you pop it and the guy just taps you, it's over. That's it. It's game over. And that's why people judge people based on Zen Med. Zen Med, soak a massive ability, but if you do anything, it's cancelled, it's over. So time it right and you get a massive 60% on-demand damage reduction. Very, very powerful when the situation arrives. Also be aware, you can teleport! My god, Brewmasters are the kings. The absolute kings of resetting bosses, because you can teleport. Yes. You can teleport. You can decide where you want to be. Now, when you're raiding, this is going to be outside the boss room door. I'm sorry. But that's what's going to happen. That is what's going to happen. But being able to teleport is pretty fucking crucial while you're a tank. On top of that, you do have a stun ability with paralysis. And you can res, but more importantly, you can dispel yourself. You can remove poison disease effects. That is really important. Especially if you're doing content with a pretty jazzy healer, right? He's not on the case with anything. You can absolutely do that. So be aware that you can dispel yourself. You can also self-heal with expel harm. You draw in the positive chi of all the healing spheres around you. We talked about the healing spheres. And of course, then heal them. It damages the nearest enemy for 10% of the amount they heal. So you get yourself a nice big fat heal, and then you do damage. In conclusion then, the Brewmaster is just an absolute ton of fun, and it's totally unique, as is Windwalker. This is why I think the Monk addition to the game was a pretty crucial moment for a lot of players. It's super, super cool, very, very enjoyable, and I recommend you get on board with it. Some resources I recommend then. Obviously, I mentioned earlier some weak auras and some tell me whens, just to keep a track of everything. Track your stagger so you can get used to your stagger, you're not overwhelmed by your stagger, and understand what your stagger does. So learning to stagger and purify is going to be the most difficult thing you learn to do, as a lot of content just flat out doesn't give you the opportunity to, if I'm being honest, until you get much, much higher up in the game. On top of that, I recommend if you're looking for some deeper reading on some more detailed stuff, especially when it comes to like tier bonuses and all those kind of things and how they work, check out peakofserenity.com. Those guys have a really lovely website that's so well done. I was very super impressed with them and the feedback from there. So thank you very much for that. Enjoy your Brewmaster. Please try it out. It's really fun. Bye-bye.